Cool. So thanks for joining. Everything is okay. I hope you hear me. That the chat is going on. I see some thumbs up. If you're good, then do that. Then we'll get started. And thanks for joining. Obviously, you're here on time. That is the important thing. So one of the things that the thing I want to be talking about today is about how you are able to deliver SAP integration or cloud integration faster. What are the different aspects and tools and techniques that you can actually use for this? And we have the Q&A open, so if you have questions along the way, you have something that you want to ask, put it into there, and I'll try also to cover that. And since you're here live, this is what matters. Cool. So I think one of the biggest aspects of this is to be able to have like a test-driven development that you can take payloads, you can start running, and being able to see how these are accelerating your development processes. We will look at some of the hardcore codings that is available that enables you to develop SAP integration faster. And then we will look at support, how you can actually do support of your different scenarios. We'll talk about how to get started with the tool and how that can help you for some of your different scenarios. So that's a little on the agenda for today. And little of what we are. So we are a company that creates tools to automate SAP integrations. We started out 7 years ago building tools to make testing faster. We added governance because that is a requirement in a lot of cases, and this is a lot of the same things that we have been adding as a part of this is the part that you will also be seeing. Plus a few news that is not really here on the recent timeline. Good. So a little more on the agenda. We'll look at the test-driven development. We'll look at support and then transport using DevOps. So as I talked about, DevOps is an important aspect of this, and I believe that you would need the DevOps, and it is something that ties a lot into what we already will be covering today. Today we'll look at a little more on, as a developer, these are the things that you need to do, but also after you have done your development, made the integration development work, you need to use the DevOps, and it is reusing a lot of the same components. So you can check this webinar out also, where we'll cover this. But I do think that this is about governance. This is about the places where you would only need. Did I miss something? No. Where you would use governance and you only have 2 CPI tenants. This is one of the places where the transport tool really makes a lot of sense and make it easier for you to manage your SAP integration. We talk a lot about documentation. That is also something that a lot of developers would need to do, spend a lot of time on, and we can also automate all of that, or at least a large part of it, making it a lot easier for you to document what you have done and what is important for you. So that is okay. Good. And then this is the full offering. There's like 10 tools in one, including immigration and all these different kind of things. So there's a lot more in than we will be covering in today's sessions. When I talk about the integration or development process, in a lot of other scenarios, it is a little more. It is a lot different than working with SAP integration. When obviously it depends on the team and what you are up to and what you will actually get involved with. So a lot of times when I have been working on some integration projects, I will get some kind of a description. We need to take this data from SAP and move it into some other system. You can maybe use this IDOC from SAP. And then there's maybe another API on this target system. Go figure out how that works. It's not that difficult. And they would give me a specification, and this would be the most obvious field. So the order number, or the customer name or customer number, but not the really ones that I would need to spend a lot of time on. And I think this was a little about the survey that I'm currently running about what are you actually getting as a consultant. And I don't know where you are on this level. Are you on the and please share in the chat also, or in the Q&A, do you normally work with like full specifications of all the fields that need to be mapped, or more this, yeah, we need this, go figure out? And I think probably, yeah, it's more the more senior you become, the less you will get of these specifications. And then the idea is you would do some unit tests yourself, you will work with the business and say, okay, so what else is it that you need besides these 3 fields that you have mapped here? And then you'll go through and say, okay, so in the target application, we need this. Okay, so how do we get it? And then it is a continuous iterative process about this. And then at some point in time, you will get to a QA point where you will deliver this or where you will deliver to the QA, and then they would do some review on it and check that everything's okay. And obviously, all of these can be mixed together. There's probably going to be some planning, some prioritization between what is actually the most important things that you should be working on for these scenarios, and then you need to adjust comparable to these. And obviously it's a good thing to have a QA at the end of the development process to see you've done everything, but architectural work and discussion should probably be moved further up in the chain and say, okay, so this is how I'm planning to solve this. Is this correct, or is this following our practice? At least if you have someone to talk with about these scenarios and how you can actually deal with these, because it is an important aspect of the monitoring development process to get input about how you can. Is this the right process? And this could also be external parties that you deal with and say, okay, could we do it in a better way, streamline it, or etc. And it is also something, yes, I call it API. It can really vary, as you probably know, what you'd get there. Okay, let's get started. Test-driven development is one of the things that I have, I've always thought that is the best process for a lot of these scenarios. At least you may not, if we start out with the normal scenario, you have some idea about the input that you're getting into this, and you can see, okay, so these are the messages that we'll be receiving. How can we deal with this? What is it that is actually important for these scenarios? And then once you have that, you will upload these input messages. You may have some output, or probably more an idea about some output messages, because it is a recursive process that you will be continuously improving over. And we will create and improve the test case and the testing response and the action. And then once we have done that, we can iterate over this. And it's about comparing the input and the output message to see everything is okay. You can also update all the parts that you have in the flow to check that it is working. And then the other thing is you may have multiple different messages that you want to test with in this scenario to see both if we have this input and if we do not have this input, and this could be two different test cases. And next question you probably will ask, hey, we got Postman, why isn't Postman good? Yes, so I love Postman. It's a really good tool to work with, to send messages into the CPI system and check that it works, and you can process messages, etc. But there's also some limitations on what it can do, and so obviously you need to have an HTTP endpoint in some format. You need to be able to maintain these as test cases, and I know that you can, or have tried a couple of times to go in and check, okay, so check that the response coming out from this has this. You can also do some XPath to see, do we get an order number? But if you need to do a lot more complicated one, it really is going to take a long time to create these test cases. And then one of the things, okay, so we need to mock this interface. How do we do it? Because you cannot create this same order again and again, or you need to make modifications to make sure that it works. And then, do you have a good way to share? So I know that Postman, and we have been using the Postman sharing of collections, is a good way to work, but obviously you need the enterprise plan for this really to work out in your scenarios. But let me show you how this would work and what we can do in Figaf to simplify this. And yeah, if you have questions, go to the Q&A and put them in there. Come on, Daniel. Select the right one. So here we have the Figaf tool, and the thing we want to do is we have a flow here. It's number 2. We can go in here and we can create a test case here. So the idea is we're starting out with a new project. We will continuously be improving on a scenario. Now it is something that exists, but obviously it can also be a new one. Faster CPI. Faster CPI. So we will create a new test case. We will give it a name. We can give it a title that will then going to be faster CPI. We can extract some payloads that is being sent here. And then we can decide what we want from this. And we will need an input message and an output message for this. So what is the message that we can send in here? And if we select here, we have a message here. And I'll just use the same one for the output. So obviously, if you knew the precise place where you wanted to fetch this data, you could add it in here. Maybe it's the message end. And then we will select create a test case. We can also have additional columns if we want to have more specificity about the data that we want and we know more about it, but in general this is the best way to do it. So we have now created a test case. On this we can go here, we can say okay, let's run it. This will then send it into the CPI system. We can open the test case here and see what kind of messages that has been processed on here. Boop. There you are. And if we look at the messages here, we can see that right now we have processed the messages. We can check how this looks, what we have of content in here, and that is all good. So the problem is when we go back here to the Figaf, we can see, okay, so there is a completed one, but we have an unfinished one. And this is simply because we did not receive this message with the right message split context. So sometimes it can be a little challenging, but for us it really doesn't matter. We will select all of them except this one, and then we will go in and say update test cases. So we will drop all messages, and now this is the actual test case that we have. So we send in a payload, we set some kind of an assertion in, and now we can check that it is producing the right results. and it will then fetch all the payloads, etc., and run. And this is a good way to iterate over your test cases. So this is how you will create it. We can see now everything looks green, and I think in the new one we will also add a better grouping here, making it a lot easier to see what has been processed. So now we can see it is marked as successful. So we are happy with this. So as you saw, it is really easy for me to create a test case. And then the problem is, okay, so I need to make a modification to this. Edit. So what do we have? We have final message. We have an XSLT. Let's take that one. So here we have the customer XSLT. We can go in and here say, okay, so now this is faster. Demo. We can say, okay, save as version. And we can say deploy. So this would be the iterative way. We will create a test case, we'll run it, and now we'll see if this invalidates the test results and give us the expected error. So it is about going through it, check you're getting errors, revert and check that these errors is the expected thing, and then you can work with these scenarios. So now we are getting a few errors. We can look at the diffs here, and we can see it is changing it from this to this. We can either just go in and ignore this, but that's not really the purpose of this. We want to say, okay, let's update the test case to actually include this scenario in it. So let's say update here. And now we have maintained the test case. So it will continuously update the test case as we work on the scenario. And that means that once you get to the end of your integration development, you have a test case. You don't need to spend an extra time on updating and managing a test case because you already have it as a part of your development phase. And this is why I do like that the test-driven development, being able to work with these scenarios. And we have a lot of options also for testing. We can set up mock that the Figaf will mock this endpoint instead of the real scenario. These kind of things just makes the development process so much easier for developers. Because you cannot call the same create order multiple times. So let me just mock this. Let's see. So we run it. We will go back here to the overview and we'll run the test case again. And what you'll see here is that it is using a different test object. This is called mock Figaf customers. Figaf mock, so this means it is a mock. And here we can see it is using a call to our backend using the cloud connector. Whereas if we look at the original one here, we can see that this is an OData service. So we do have this way of working and updating test cases, making sure they're always relevant. And then when you are changing this, it will contain some different scenarios that you would need to go in and say, okay, let's ignore some of these elements because some of the headers that is being set can differ for this. Let's just unselect the mock and say, no, this is okay. So this is also really useful. You can have multiple different test cases when you're running this. Any questions on the testing, then just add them into the Q&A and I will try to cover those. But yeah, the next thing is, okay, we have also the groovy and XSLT. These are really powerful tools that allow you to actually edit and manage your integration a lot faster. So the idea here is that instead of, so each time I need to run something in my CPI, system, it takes a lot of time for me for both going into edit, save, deploy, run, compare the result. What if we could speed this process up? So let's see here. So here we have the different resources. We can say, okay, let's take this headers here 1. And what we can then see is we are getting this open in Figaf. So it says here it's not been synchronized. That means Figaf needs to be informed that there is a new version of this object. Because we saved as a version, that means that it is potentially a new object, and that means it could have been changed. I'm not sure it would. So we just select close, and then we go here, we can open the IDE. Here we can select the test case we just created, and we can select one of the iterations that has been run. And now we can actually see, okay, so we got this input data, here's some JSON. And let's see what it is producing. We can select which run method we want to do, and we can see it is now producing the same JSON. If we made a modification here, oh, we can run again, and if we do a compare here, it will say, okay, so there we expected this but got this. So this is really an easy way to see this, does my code work? And then yeah, you can obviously modify the headers, etc. But this does not update the test case. This just updates this current instance of the processes that are running. So the idea is obviously you can go and say, okay, I have this input, and so that's the next one I think here. So that is ChatGTP, where you can get a lot of extra input on how to deal with these different scenarios. So here I'm thinking passing a JSON body. So the idea is here I'll paste in, I got this payload here. Can you create a pass JSON? And this does not work in this case because it looks at the incoming payload. So you need, if you're using ChatGPT and makes a lot of sense in a lot of scenarios, then you need to give it the right data and being able to process the payload and then produce the correct result. We can just take this code here and we can then put it in here and we can run it again. I think so now it has processed, what is it, for each message it will set all of these properties. So right now we have a different payload than the original one. So you need to update these continuously and make sure you have some relevant data for it. And I think one of the idea here is I want to create a CPI. So obviously it is this 2-year-old, and CPI was more the term for it than to work on these scenarios. So we can just say, okay, so let the So let's see if it can figure out how to pass this. And obviously, when you're dealing with something like this, it becomes a lot more fun to do live demos of this. Yeah, I don't think this will work, but let's try it. And this is the part where it is more fun to have it directly in here. So we can actually see it did actually work with all of these scenarios and put them into our properties. Okay, so let's just go back. So it will not save anything, but if we want to do some coding faster, we can update our result here, and we can run it again, and we can then upload. So once we upload, the artifact here in our CPI system, not the mock one, but in the real one, will be updated. So now we can see it has the coding faster. And the only thing we need to do is go into edit, deploy. Oh. And now it is being deployed. We can run our test case again. where we'll send a message and then we'll get the same or a different response, hopefully. We also get a notification here that we have a different version deployed, or we have the draft version deployed and a different version as the right version. So you obviously this is the version that is deployed. So you get this information, which is really useful when you're running these tests to see if you actually tested everything correctly. And now we are getting some errors here towards the end. That is that we are getting this value that's different. We just add it to the ignore list. We compare the messages again, 12 test cases, and now it's all green. So it is this continuously iterative process about taking some payloads, testing it, and running. I hope you did like this this way of working with the XSLTs, with the different artifacts that you have. We have the same for XSLT, and I think this is so. XSLT, I believe, is really powerful. It is one of the things that, as an integration developer, it can save you a lot of time because you can make some really cool stuff in XSLT. And CPI support XSLT 3.0, which is a bit rare. And actually, it gives you a lot of new improvements. And what we can actually do is, if we same process as we had here, we go into the references, we have the XSLT here. We can see here we are also getting a open in Figaf. Here we can also run the same test. And we can run it either locally on Figaf. I think this is failing for some reason. Either I have not defined something or there is some other thing, but I can run it in a CPI iFlow. So it will actually process it in a real CPI. And this gives me some advantages so it will take a little longer to do that. But when you do that, you just get a lot more, it just makes it faster. So this is XSLT, the editor, and I think that is also the editing part, about making it easier for developers to actually run and use these tools, because the Groovy, XSLT, both of these tools is really powerful, but the process, if you need to make changes and run them, will take, I don't know, like a minute if you just need to make a small modification to check that you have right version deployed, run it, and find the place in the trace. With this, you got instant response after 1-2 seconds, and this, yeah, just speed up your development quite a bit. Cool. Next up is our Git and IntelliJ, and the idea here is we wanted to, well, I guess before we created our own editor, we needed a good way to work on a lot of these resources. And the best way we found was to create a Git repository where we replicated all of the different integrations. And I think that is one of the misconceptions when you talk about Git and DevOps, CI/CD. Everybody talks about GitHub. Git is the way to go, and well, in a CPI world or cloud integration world, it really becomes difficult, as I see it, to use Git. You can do it, but the effort of doing it really is more complicated. And I think that is one of the reasons I'm pretty glad that we do have this into the product, and in a way that does not require you to do a lot of effort. The idea is that Figaf continuously would be updating the Git repository, and this gives you a lot of opportunities to search in this Git repository because you have all of your resources. You can use them as when you create this Git repository. It comes with a lot of predefined templates that enables you to work smarter with it. And then if you're really a good developer, you can also set up, for instance, CPI lint as a part of this, process. So each time you make an iFlow, it will check, does it follow CPI lint, and run some unit tests. And this is also something that will improve it. I think this is more for the really specialized developers that are doing a lot of groovy code, a lot of XSLT work, because there you need these extra capabilities. But let me show you what this looks like. Oh, sorry. So we have here a Git repository. And let's first start with a pull here. So we can see that 5 minutes ago we updated something. We updated this header. We updated. It also has documentation, and so an iFlow documentation is really nice to have. And we can see here the iFlow and the groovy was updated, and we can compare this to with local, see what was changed in it. So with this, we have a lot of ability to improve or understand what's going on. One of the really cool part about this is we can also run it. So when you have created a test case, you also get the ability to create this these resources. So without any need to do coding, it will come up with some groovy scripts that you can use, and some input payload. So this is the part we're receiving, this is the part out, and then we have some, for instance, we can take the header here, we can set a payload, a breakpoint in it, and that means if I go to my groovy here and select set header 2 here, or set header, we obviously can run all of them if we have configured everything correctly. And that is part of the reason. You just need to make sure everything is set up correctly. Configured Groovy SDK. So now we are getting, yeah. So sometime I get this on my PC, and this is why there is something wrong with some of the projects that I have in this. So these are all auto-populated, and it updates these unit tests, or all of these packages, but there's somehow it ends up with a wrong state, and this is why I think you need to be a pretty good integration developer to actually work with these ones and where it makes sense. If it had worked, we also had some artifacts over here we could upload this content and making it easier for us to work with these scenarios. And yeah, we could run these smoothly with our, so now it is, this is a different project, this is okay. So here it's created in the same way. I can run it in debug. So here I can see when I go into this, what does this message look like at this point in time? What are the payloads, etc. So in some cases, this can be really powerful if you want to understand what's going on, how to check and validate your different scenarios. So this makes the life easier for integration developers. For the ones that really need a large editor, we have found, or good editor, we have found that some of these cases, so for instance, if you're doing migration, sometimes the built-in editor of CPI does not give you all the information you need, and neither does our. And here this groovy editor can give you some more pointers about where there could be some problems. So this is IntelliJ. They have a free community edition that you can use, and then it is coupled with the Figaf, or with a Git repository. You can use any Git repository, but just and then the Figaf tool will populate this. That means as a developer, the only thing you need to update would be if you create changes to the test script, because then you can always go back and revert and find these scenarios. Is that okay? Yes. So this is IntelliJ that you can run, but yeah, for most integration developers, don't worry about it. But if you have scenarios where you need an extra tool, this is really useful for it. Good. The other thing we want to talk about is the testing part and also support part. So one of the things that often happens is you deliver an integration, you do some hypercare, and you make sure that everything works. And then you leave the project, or you go on a vacation, and then the business always complains, hey, there's something that is not working. How do we support it? How do we make it easy for customers to go through and check and validate these different things? And this is where I do think that having these test cases that you can see what is going on. So once you run these scenarios, you can see, okay, so, and then with CPI helper, or just go into the trace, you can go in and see, okay, so what does this produce? And once you make any corrections or changes, you can see immediately how this is affecting the change management and the processes. And if it does that as expected, and obviously if you're getting another input payload, you can update that and use that as a part of the testing, making the process a little more smooth when working with these scenarios. So that's trying to integrate the full end-to-end pipeline in a way of delivering this. And then obviously once you've done that, you made the changes, fixed it, and seen that it works, the Figaf tool DevOps version and the transport just makes the process much smoother to let you get into whatever changes that had occurred earlier. So that was what I wanted to talk about in this one. Just that, yeah, it is about making it a lot easier for you. Then we do come to a bit of a claim, because, yeah, and I don't know, well, it obviously depends a lot about what you're normally doing, how you're working, what are your different workflows, how much time do you spend on talking with the business, how much time do you spend on technical implementation. But I do think once you get to the technical implementation of different features and functions, using the Figaf tool just makes the process a lot simpler, and I believe that we can save 30% of the development effort that you're into, and this, yeah, just makes it easier for you to deliver integration. And yeah, if it's 30%, you save 50 hours a month, which I guess you cannot take that part off. Maybe you can. It depends on your scenarios. But I think in a lot of cases you will just be able to do a lot more integration work, being able to work on some different scenarios, and being able to deliver on these different cases that you have. And then the improve is about improving the quality, because you have the test cases, you have the ability to run all of these different things. You have the governance perspective in place that allows you to do the governance. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I really hate doing documentations. And if I can get all of the documentation created automatically, there's no reason that I should be creating this. So for instance, if we look at this Git repository, we can see it is creating these documentation Excel. And here we can see we have this iFlow. We have seen all of the different changes that happened with this. We have a diagram or connections, flow descriptions, resources that is using for this, and I think we also have the number of test cases, making it a lot easier for you to document and saving a lot of time. And there's a whole host of other reports that you can generate comparison. You can compare different iFlow versions, which also makes it a lot easier. So just if you go in here and you want to say, okay, so what was it actually that we did today? You can just take these two versions, press compare, and it will show you what was changed between these ones. So now, so that we only did changes of the UI, but let's just take it since the here. No, still no error. But normally you'd see that there was where there were some changes here. If you look at the BPMN, we can also look at the Git. What are the different text versions that we have here? This just makes it a lot easier, and that means that when you're doing support, you can go and see, okay, so this guy has these or made these changes. Is that what is causing the problem, or what is actually going on in this scenario? Good. So that was a bit about it. Yeah, no one wants to do these kind of things, but the governance, documentation, all these things, testing. And I think a lot of cases you would have the part about saying, hey, we have done the integration work. Business, go test and do all the things there. And they will say, we have no clue about what you have made and how to test it, so we will not do it. And you have something that will never really finish, and it will just be, okay, we have a project that is going to, and you'll need to manage this. If you have all of the unit tests, you can run those and document that you have made the changes and that works. We do have a number of different editions of Figaf. The one that is relevant for this is the DevOps edition. This is the ones that allow you to take these, create test cases, upload artifacts, use the Git repository, have versioning, have the comparison tool of it. It costs 10,000 euros a year for the first 100 iFlows. And then the more you have, the cheaper subsequent iFlows becomes, making it a lot easier for you to get started with the tool and managing in a simple way. Yeah, so that is the pricing. We recommend running it in BTP Cloud Foundry, where you also have a lot of advantages, that it is easy to maintain and upgrade. So we try to create about 10 different versions a year. So each month we will do a new release, plus a number of patches to improve the tool. And you can upgrade to any of these versions. All of them are forwards compatible, so it's really easy to upgrade. And when you have it in Cloud Foundry, it is all in your tenants. All the data exists in your instance of Figaf, making the data privacy a lot better, and the recommended approach. That was what I wanted to cover. I hope this was some of the ideas that you could see. If there's something I didn't cover, something you think, hey, Daniel, this would be good. You didn't cover these kind of things. What are the different scenarios that we could otherwise talk about? So one thing, until you get some questions, one thing we have been toying a little around this thing. You have an iFlow, let's say this version, the main iFlow, and you want to say, okay, let's create a copy of this that is related to a service request, and say, okay, for this iFlow, we will be, or for this modification, we will be using this iFlow version. We'll make all the modifications that we need into it. Once we are done, we will merge it back into the real scenario. Would that be useful for you to have some kind of a way that would allow you to register which iFlow that you're working on as a part of either a long or short-term project, and how many versions of an iFlow would you actually have? Because for us, it would be really easy to say, okay, let's take a copy of this iFlow, move it into with a postfix that is called Figaf whatever Figaf and the ticket number 50. And then once you have done all the development on that, we'll move it back into the main one and you can transport it in the landscape. And that would work. But the question is, would that be a good process, and would there be other ways that you would want to work on these scenarios? Then just hit the chat. I think maybe more, is there something that you find relevant, or something that you're talking about? So how do we maintain a lot of different versions of the same iFlow and make sure that developers can fix this, even the ones that has a long-term project and a short-term delivery cycle to handle those scenarios? So that was one question I would like. We are considering how we can do. If you have questions, just put them into the chat, and I'll try to answer those as well as possible.